So I'm working on my next Trek Actually video. I have it scripted. I've got a lot of the graphics put together. I'm going to shoot it next week, and hopefully it'll be up around then, sometime next week or the week after that. But in the meantime, there are some other Trek-related things that I would like to talk about, some things I'd like to get off my chest, and so I'm going to do another one of these not actually Trek Actually videos, because these are the ones where I don't script it or really try very hard. So the new Star Trek Discovery trailer was released recently, and opinions are very sharply divided in the Star Trek fan community. Some people, like me, thought that it looks awesome and can't wait for the show, and we've been waiting for the show longer than we thought we'd be waiting for the show, because the show is supposed to start in January, and then they said, nah, well, it's going to be May, it's going to be May. And then they said, it's not going to be May, it's going to be sometime this year. And then finally, at the upfronts, a couple weeks ago, they said, oh, it's going to be in the fall. And they're, okay, well, that's specific. So, okay, what, September to December, sometime in that window. Excellent. And they showed the first trailer, and I thought it looked great. Yes, it didn't look like TOS era Trek. It looked more like the Abrams version of Trek, but it's set in the Prime universe, which is important to a lot of people. And I thought the set design looked awesome. I thought the special effects looked awesome. I liked the uniform design. I liked all of it. I just think it looks great, and I am eager to check it out, and I hope that it's a good show. But there are some other folks that had some other problems with it, and they weren't really the kinds of problems that I think deserve to be taken seriously, and I hope that they're not the sort of problems that are found by a large portion of the Star Trek fan community. I don't think they are, but these sorts of folks have always been there. And they've had problems with Star Trek for this reason before, but that doesn't mean that they're ever going to go away. And these are the folks who are upset because Star Trek Discovery is too politically correct. I haven't even seen the show yet, but they know that it's too politically correct. You know how they know that it's too politically correct? For the same reason that folks knew that Star Wars The Force Awakens was going to be too politically correct before they ever saw that movie, because there's women and black people in it. Oh boy, it's a Star Trek show where it looks like from the trailer the two lead characters, they're both women, and one of them is a black woman and one of them is an Asian woman. Uh-oh, white genocide. SJWs are ruining Star Trek, which, by the way, when someone says that, that makes me laugh on so many different levels. For one thing, if you are a grown-up and you are unironically using the term SJW, you probably need to take a good long look at yourself in the mirror and sort of reevaluate some things. If you are seriously, sincerely calling other people SJWs and you expect to be taken seriously by other adults when you say that, you need there's something going on there that you maybe need to reevaluate. But when they say SJWs have taken over Star Trek, I got news for you. SJWs invented Star Trek. And actually, that would be a really good title for this video. Just hang on, I want to write that down just to make sure that I don't forget that. SJWs invent. As I said, there have always been these people, there have always been these reactionary responses whenever any property that has been perceived as being dominated by white folks, or particularly white men, starts to be more racially and sexually inclusive. There are always people who are going to flip out about it and start complaining. It happened, as I said, a couple years ago with The Force Awakens, and it's even happened before in Star Trek. That's one of the things that I wanted to bring up in this video. I've been a Star Trek fan for my entire life. I'm 37. I've been a fan for probably about 30 years at this point. I came in right before Next Generation started, and I have seen this before. And it has never made any sense to me. When Avery Brooks was cast as Captain Sisko and they announced that Deep Space Nine would be the first Star Trek series to have a black actor playing the lead, there were people who complained about that. Affirmative action! Star Trek's going with affirmative action, or they're picking a token black guy so they can pat themselves on the back for how diverse they are. Star Trek Voyager, oh Jesus, now there's a woman captain. Oh, and there's a black Vulcan, more affirmative action. Oh, there's a woman gonna be captain, how are they gonna know who's in charge? What if she gets her period while she's in space? We've heard this before, and it has never made the least bit of sense, especially when people are complaining about Star Trek. And why is that? Because Star Trek is probably, no, not even probably, Star Trek is definitely the most intentionally, self-consciously, politically correct show that has ever been made. And I don't like the term politically correct either, but I think you know what I'm talking about when I say that. Progressive, inclusive, diverse. That has been a part of Star Trek's mission from the very beginning. It's not something that just sort of happened. It's not something that later producers or writers kind of forced on it. The dude who created Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, who I have a lot of complicated feelings about. I'm one of the Star Trek fans who thinks that he probably gets way too much credit for Star Trek and for what Star Trek ultimately became. But one of the things Gene Roddenberry did right was from the very beginning, he said, by design, this show is going to be diverse. This show is not going to be just about white men. There's going to be people of color on this show. There's going to be women on this show. The crew of this starship is going to be multicultural, is going to be gender equal. And it's going to be part of the show. It's going to be part of the point of the show. If you see the Star Trek Discovery trailer and all of a sudden you're flipping out about political correctness and SJW stuff in Star Trek, where the fuck have you been? What show have you been watching? I would love to know. I would love to know what you think Star Trek is. If you have watched it for however many years you've watched it, and you have somehow missed all of the stories about the importance of diversity and inclusion and tolerance, that all just went right over your head. So what show have you been watching? What do you think Star Trek is? Honestly, no disrespect. Racist who has a problem with black women in Star Trek. No disrespect. But what a flat, boring world you must live in. That you have, I mean, it's not like it's even subtle. It's not like it's just this little thing in Star Trek that's very sort of under the radar. It's subtext, and some people pick up on it, and some people don't. It's not subtext. I'm gonna go out on a limb, dude. It's not subtext, dude. It's text. Star Trek has always been overtly about inclusion and diversity and tolerance and equality. So if you're complaining now because you see a black woman and an Asian woman in a trailer and you're like, where are the white dudes? Congratulations on missing the point of the thing you're complaining about that you're supposedly such a fan of more epically than is even typical on the internet. Epic point missing is one of the foremost features of the internet. But you, my friend, if you have missed the message of tolerance and diversity in Star Trek, you have missed the point on a hitherto unheard of scale. Congratulations. And congratulations for carrying on that tradition, because you are joining a proud line of reactionary malcontents who also pissed and moaned about Captain Janeway and Tuvok and Commander Sisko. Congratulations. And I'm not saying, by the way, that Star Trek is perfect, because certainly it is not. There is room to critique Star Trek for its gender politics and for its racial politics, right? But you have to do that in a way that is constructive and in a way that actually references stuff that is part of the show and that is maybe a mistake or something that has been overlooked or something that has not been done properly. For instance, you can look at the way that different species are written on Star Trek, and they're sort of they're very essentialized. You know, Klingons are all about honor and battle, and Romulans are all sneaky, and Cardassians are all also kind of sneaky and militaristic and sort of state-centered, and Ferengi are all greedy and worried about capitalists, and Vulcans are all serene and calm and logical. You can look at that, and there are obviously reasons why that was done, because the various races in Star Trek are meant to represent parts of human nature, and that's why they're all sort of monolithic. You know, there's a reason why that was done, but it also can kind of maybe come across as a little racialist. That can be problematic at times, and that's something that is worth criticizing. That's a valuable, valid critique of Star Trek, as far as I'm concerned. You can also talk about the times when maybe its good intentions weren't enough. Even Gene Roddenberry, when he said, I'm gonna make a multiracial cast. And that's a great idea, and he deserves a lot of credit for that, and Star Trek in general deserves a lot of credit for that. It was pioneering in that way. But it wasn't perfect. In the original Star Trek, and to a large extent in the Next Generation as well, that even though the crew was racially diverse, and diverse in terms of gender, the stories still mostly revolved around the white men. You know, Uhura was there, Sulu was there, but the show was 90% of the time revolving around Kirk and Spock and McCoy. So it wasn't perfect. And it's open, it's valid to critique those sorts of things. It's valid to point out the problems and the imperfections and where things could be improved. If you're saying that Star Trek, by casting people of color and women and making a point to do that, that somehow that itself is inherently a problem, that you're going to complain about that, that to me makes no more sense than saying, you know, I saw that movie Days of Thunder, but there's just too much car shit. I mean, you don't have to like it, but saying there's too much car shit, that's not really a flaw in the movie. You don't have to like it. You can say it wasn't executed well. You can say it doesn't appeal to your taste. It makes no sense to complain about something that has always been a core part of the show, you know? And a show that has always preached, I mean, and I think preach is the right word, preached tolerance and equality. In every generation, in every iteration of the show, that has been a part of it. And to see a trailer for the new show where the main characters appear to be a black woman and an Asian woman, and to say, oh, it's political correctness run amok. Start paying attention to the show, would you? If you call yourself a fan of Star Trek, if you call yourself a fan and you are cashing in your fan card to complain about that stuff in Star Trek Discovery, maybe you should just actually start paying attention to the show. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's not Star Trek Discovery. Maybe it's not, oh, political correctness gone amok. Maybe it's not all the SJWs are taking over. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're just an inflexible, closed-minded, reactionary dipshit. And maybe you should either watch the show and pay attention to the things that the show is doing and has always done, or you should just watch a different fucking show. I mean, if you're bothered by seeing non-white men in prominent roles on TV, I've got great news for you. There's plenty of other places you can go. Maybe you should just watch something else and shut the fuck up.